Hello, everyone. Today I will be interviewing Isabel Lepanto Gleicher, a flutist and music creator.
Hello. Thank you, Andreas. Excited to chat with you.
A couple questions I have. My first one is, how do you find inspiration for your compositions?
Yeah, uh, I'd say there's like two parts to that question. It's only been about a year that I've been composing, and that has been, um, I don't want to say forced, but I was initially inspired to do that because of the pandemic and the quarantine and being stuck alone, left to my own devices to play music. And I was missing my colleagues and I was missing the community. And this was something that I could do um, for myself to make me feel like I was a part of something bigger, something that I can involve other artists in a new way that felt relevant to the times. And so I started recording myself and writing things and using instruments and random sounds in my apartment and creating my own music. Now I'd say I am lucky enough that I'm not forced to create anything really. So anything that I want to create or compose or record is pretty much if I am inspired. So that's kind of nice. I don't know what it feels like to have to write a piece and not feel inspired, but have to do it anyway, you know? So, Andreas, I will get back to you when that day happens on how I find inspiration. But I have been finding inspiration in lots of things in my when I get to go outside and it's a beautiful day, you know, and I see something new that isn't in my apartment, and suddenly that sparks something. Or I do like to scat along to commercials like all the time, and so sometimes I'll get an annoying little like motive stuck in my head because of the Allstate commercial or whatever. And that then grows into something larger. So I let it come pretty naturally.
Things that, the pandemic has, allowed us to do. Like for, March, I don't think any of these things would have happened with
Right.
finding home inspiration.
Exactly. Silver linings.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'll ask you a question. Um, I hear that you are an athlete as well as a musician. Do you play tennis? Is that correct?
Yes, I play tennis.
Yeah, so I was also a serious athlete when I was younger, and I I'm just curious about what you have learned from your endeavors with sports that you've taken to your musical practice, whether it is in performance or actually practicing.
Well, I think what's notable about tennis is that it's one of those sports that um, can be partially something that's relaxing, and it also can be something that really tests your mental, capabilities, and is something competitive. And that's something that's very similar to music as well. Like a lot of times, music finds joy and happiness when you're just playing something. But obviously, during something like a recital or a competition, there's those occasional nerves that you have to kind of combat with your playing, and like how you strategize, shaky, like for instance not having a shaky bow, or making sure your intonation's good. So I feel like when I do play tennis, oftentimes I just hit around with either my family or my friends, and it really relaxes me in a way to just think about the positives, and not focus on any negatives and what bad things could happen when I'm playing. And I think it helps me relax my brain uh when I'm practicing too, for the cello, and I also play the piano too. Like they're very soothing, instruments where it just kind of helps me just focus on just the positives and great things that music can really grant for people. So I think it just makes me relaxed, and then it also teaches me, how to be mentally strong and like, deal with pressure when I'm performing, and not succumbing to pressure and all that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, tennis is like a major solo,
Yeah, you're on your
sport, and
own.
so yeah, absolutely.
So my second question, it's a little more complicated. Do you prefer music when the meaning is implied and up to interpretation? So something more along the lines of like a modern contemporary piece, or something that has a specific meaning. So like a movement of like a symphony that like it clearly states that, this movement reflects like joy or a thunderstorm or anger, like something where what you're expecting.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I also want to address the idea that contemporary music doesn't necessarily have a set meaning. But um, I think for my own aesthetic, I think I'm more drawn to pieces where it is up for interpretation from the listeners. There's one of my favorite composers and thinkers is this woman, Pauline Oliveros, and she writes extensively about different people's experiences, and that we don't know how anyone else experiences anything, right? And so I like to think about that when I'm writing stuff. Is definitely that, like, this was my inspiration or this is what I'm getting out of it, but that I think it's beautiful leaving it up for so many different interpretations. That being said, of course, I think some of the most meaningful music is one where there is like unified agreement on this. Everyone leaves feeling overjoyed or feeling sorrow, and there's something very powerful in the community of that. So there's, all sounds are beautiful and meaningful. Yeah, so maybe this is a good segue into this question. Right now, you play cello and piano, you said, and you are studying classical music mostly, right? But you're also interested in contemporary music and exploring that, and have some, education in new music as well. And I'm curious about how this informs your musical voice, if you will.
As far as contemporary music, the modern music, the way it works is there's obviously like lyrical music that we hear, on the radio or something. And there's also stuff that you do with, taking everyday, that's my dog, everyday
so, right,
objects.
My cat is sitting behind my computer, so I'm with you.
So, oh, goodness, dog. So, there's stuff that you do, which is like taking everyday objects and really making something creative and really innovative out of it. So I feel like there's, those two things. And it really helps me find like inspiration and like new ways to, create ideas when I play like something like classical music. Classical music, it's more straightforward and direct, where you kind of know what you're up against with the music as far as like dynamics and intonation. Even though there obviously is musicality, it's like more of like, what you're doing, I guess. Whereas contemporary music has a lot more like power and meaning, and that like you can sort of be creative with it. And that's, geez Louise, it's very loud. That's something that's like seen with, something like rock and roll, where there's like all these, um, loud noises and, words with like all that. And there's also like something like contemporary music with like a loud drum, or like, taking a table and like making creative noises out of it with, so at the end of the day, I think really taking different ideas of music together, it really helps me with like the stuff I learn as far as classical music, and that it gives me like new ideas. And I think there's such a wide variety of contemporary music now, like stuff relating to the Romantic period or classical period, to new creative ideas, taking things that people really never hear of, and it's something new every day.
Absolutely. I think we forget how much a precedent really affects us, right? There's like precedent for listening to Mozart, that we don't necessarily have with a composer that we don't know, or new sounds. And so we sort of take that for granted sometimes. And yeah, I totally agree. I love that new music keeps you on your toes. The fundamentals of music are still there, but because the sounds are different, we suddenly feel a little bit differently about it.
So my last question is, what question do you wish you were asked?
Right, yes, that question. I think I wish people asked more questions in general. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about this question of what question do I like, and I was thinking of musical things, but then I was thinking more about just life, and how asking more questions in general with any interaction is a way to get to know someone, obviously, and to know what they're thinking, and to really listen to their answer. And I think this builds empathy. And I think that's something that in our world we need more collectively, you know? And instead of like assuming that we know what's going on in anyone's head, you know, just asking simple questions allows us to connect. And I think connectivity is something that, especially during this pandemic, is something that I'm definitely yearning for. So I love to hear what people are thinking and asking and sharing. And so I think I just wish in general people were asking each other more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I'll ask you one more question.
Sure.
It's also a little bit meta, like your last question. But I'm curious about what goes on in your head, what sounds you hear when there is silence. So I think about this sometimes. There's a great composer, John Cage, who spent some time in an anechoic chamber, which is a sound, like the most soundproof space. And he sat in there for so long that he could hear the insides of his body. And I'm not asking you like, what does your heartbeat sound like? But I mean, it's just an interesting idea that when it's silent or when there's nothing to inform what's going on in your head, what are you thinking about? What are the sounds that you're hearing?
I can sort of come up with two answers for this, and that one of it would be that oftentimes I make like musical tunes in my head when I have like nothing I can, hear. I think that's part of just the creative musician thing that sometimes we get is just we want to, hear music and we want to, make tunes and jingles and stuff like that. So I think sometimes, and this is, in my mind, and it's also whistling too sometimes when I'm alone. And secondly, sometimes the things we daydream about, at least for me, sometimes when I daydream, it kind of can sort of stir up like a tune or either a tune or just like an emotion in a way, if that makes sense. Like sometimes, and this is, especially during the COVID pandemic, I tend to wander a lot throughout my mind and just, think about, what my virtual class will be like next week or what I'm going to do over the weekend and, stuff like that. And also like, when is this crazy time going to end? So it sort of provokes different emotions and different thought processes. And this can relate to, styles of music as far as like, something dark when we're thinking about, the effect that COVID's had on a lot of us, or something uplifting, like, being able to chat with some friends online or see family. First, I mean, like Christmas, because obviously it's different. So I think it provokes different, emotions and ideas, and especially when I'm not listening to, other sounds or hearing sounds. I think part of that is we have to really make it for ourselves and really think about, what's going on in our lives and what we're truly thinking and how we're feeling. And I think that can create different sounds and ideas.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, I want to thank you, Andreas, for joining me for this, and
thank you so much, you too.
And thank BridgeMusik for everything. And yeah. BridgeMusik.